Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to Fable Forge. Today I got a couple nice scary videos for y'all from the most mysterious and paranormal thing you've witnessed. So please grab a blanket and enjoy. If you liked it, please like and subscribe. R slash ask Reddit. What is the most mysterious slash paranormal thing you've witnessed? Story 1. My father passed away last year. One item he always said he wanted to give me was a shotgun which had originally belonged to his grandfather. For years he had this shotgun stashed in the attic. After he passed, I had gone in the attic to look for it, only to find that it wasn't there. A few months later, I had a dream in which I was talking to him, and I asked him where he put the shotgun. He told me it was in the closet of the spare bedroom. I called my mother and had her check, and sure enough, there it was. Now, it's completely possible that my father had told me when he was alive and the dream was a little bit more than a memory, but I certainly don't recall that being the case. Story 2. My mom had told me this story the other day and it freaked me out. When my oldest sister was little, like 3, she asked my then pregnant aunt to pick her up and hold her. My mom said she was like, "She can't pick you up, honey. She has a baby in her tummy." And then my little sister was like, "That baby is dead." My mom freaked out, but my aunt and grandma were fine and were telling my mom it's all good. She was just a toddler and she didn't know what we were saying. Lo and behold, when my aunt goes to the doctor the next day for a routine pregnancy checkup and the baby was dead. Still gives me the willies just thinking about it. Story 3. When I was 15, my mother and I were standing in the kitchen talking. There was a rack on the wall holding keys about 8 feet away. A key from the rack flew across the room and hit the floor near our feet. This is the only event in my life for which I have no explanation. Story 4. Scariest moment of my life happened to me while my friend and I were camping in eastern Canada as teenagers. We decided to sleep in this abandoned camper we found deep in a large forest that was near our town. It had been there so long that small trees had grown around it. We'd stumbled across it when we were exploring a few months back and thought it would be cool and brave to sleep there for a night. So one weekend, we did it. We arrived later after dark because we had gotten lost trying to find the camper. We had a really low power flashlight, so it made it even more difficult. Once we finally found it, we opened the rusty door and stepped in. The sounds inside the camper were shrill and echoey. There were typical camper things strewn about: cups, empty cans, swollen pulp fiction novels. Already tired, we holed up in one end of the camper where the bed had originally been, before cushions had rotten away to almost nothing. A long hallway stretched the length of the camper, so we could basically see from end to end. It was a miserable night. There were several rats living in there. I saw them staring at us from a chewed out part of the ceiling. When the wind blew outside, the camper would shriek and groan. We even thought we heard a bear walking outside too. Still, we feigned bravely and acted like we were having a good time, but we were on edge. At some point, I woke up from an uncomfortable sleep. I sat up to adjust myself when I noticed some movement out the corner of my eye. At the other end of the camper, there was a small window, and as I looked at it, I saw a man's silhouette. He was clearly staring at us from the outside. At first, I thought maybe it was a weird shape of the tree or something, but when I moved a bit to get a better look, the person clearly reacted and then froze. My heart was pumping, and I woke up to my friend immediately saying, "Someone is here," over and over in a whisper, not taking my eyes off of his profile. He woke up immediately, and I nodded towards the window. He saw him too. We whispered frantically about who it could be and why he was staring at us, and for the next 10 minutes, no joke, we stared him down. The longer we stared at him, the more frightened we got. Occasionally he would move, but always keeping his eyes locked on us. Eventually I shouted, "Hey!" and no reaction. My friend was braver than me and decided to shine the flashlight at him. As soon as he did, we realized our horrible mistake. It wasn't a window at all, and on the other side of the camper, it was a mirror. We had been staring down ourselves from the very start. Completely idiotic. Still, it was the most fearful, relieving, and funny moment of my life that I'll never forget. Closest to paranormal I've been. Story 5. I saw a shadow person once. I didn't know that's what it was called until much later. I was living in a house and Laguna Beach, and that had been there since the 1920s. In its history, it had been a speakeasy, a brothel, and a house for smuggling illegal immigrants. One day, my new wife and I were having an argument. I can't even recall what it was about. She walked down the block to get a cup of coffee and cool off, and I was alone in the house. The way the place was built was incredibly haphazard. There was a bedroom and living room on one side, and then a bathroom with two entrances. On the other side of the bathroom, there was a hallway that had windows on one side and two bedrooms on the other. From my bedroom, I could look across the hall into the bathroom and then notice the bathroom down the other hall. I was standing at my dresser and I had just noticed movement out the corner of my eye and looked down there. There was, and to be honest to God, this gives me goosebumps just typing it 17 years later, a black figure. It was maybe 3 feet tall and it was only vaguely humanoid. It had looked like black scribbles, like someone had scribbled a human shape, but the scribbles moved, like electricity arcing. That's the best way to describe it. There was no sound that I could remember. I distinctly remember when I saw it, I wasn't afraid. I was just like, WTF? Then it noticed me looking at it. I can't say that it turned around, it just focused on me, I guess. Then I was scared. I didn't move, didn't scream, nothing. I was just frozen because it came at me. It rushed down the hallway towards me. I have no idea what it intended, but as soon as it entered the bathroom, the door closest to me just slammed shut. Then I screamed. I yelled for my wife. She wasn't home. I went outside into the daylight and didn't go back into that room until she got there 10 minutes later. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe I saw something supernatural, but I know I saw something. I just don't know what it was. Story 6. My grandfather passed away just a few weeks after I was born. Never met the guy, never knew what he looked like. When I was 5 years old, I started to see this man in my rocking chair. I called him the rocking man. My parents thought it was that imaginary friend stage, but it started to bug them when I told them every single day. They finally questioned me about it, and I told them every detail I could remember and finally showed me a picture of the man. It was my grandfather. To this day, I'm 22 now. Every time I dream, he's in the background somewhere. I remember when I dreamed about my high school graduation and I looked in the stands and I saw him with my parents. I like to think that he's just watching out for me and being there when he's not really there. So I am a true believer of the paranormal. Story 7. I attended the same university for my bachelor's and my PhD. There was a lovely woman by the name of Jennifer who was my reading in the content area instructor. The guys all swooned over her. She was gorgeous, and I loved her because she read us to give her out loud. She was an awesome instructor and was doing her PhD in literacy. Fast forward few years, and Jen had moved to South Carolina to teach literacy. I'm now in my PhD program and in the same grad student office she used to work in, with other literacy people that were her colleagues. And then we get the news that she was murdered by her boyfriend. Everyone is totally devastated. It was a huge blow to the department as she was genuinely loved by everybody who knew her. So a few days after her funeral, her body was brought home. I'm in the office suite at my school very early in the morning when no one else is around. The grad students had a fishbowl office, 10 of us with group desks, within a larger office suite that was locked and had motion light sensors. I'm walking in and past a door locked with windows, and I see a woman with short, dark hair walk the other way inside, which was weird because the lights didn't flicker on when she moved. So I walked around the corner to the door with a key code and let myself in. I walk inside and head to where I saw her. The lights flicker on when they sense me. Nobody's there. It's just me, an entire suite of empty offices. I swear it was her saying goodbye to a place she spent so many years and where she had so many friends. It spooked me very much, but made me sad too. Story 8. I grew up in the Arctic. In the town I lived in, as long as it was a clear night, it was an extremely normal occurrence to see all sorts of strange lights move across the sky. Keep in mind that winter is long in the Arctic, which means longer amounts of time being under the stars. It's quite beautiful as long as you don't mind the cold so much. Sometimes I would drive a snowmobile a few kilometers out of town, shut it down, and just lay in the snow looking up at the majesty of it all. the only thing disturbing the silence being the occasional breeze. The northern lights are also a common occurrence. Doesn't happen every day, but often enough that they started getting ignored after a while, as long as they weren't too spectacular anyway. On one particular night, without asking my parents, it was their snowmobile, I decided to go on one of my midnight drives out of town. I drove a few kilometers over the hill and found the spot devoid of light pollution from the town, shut off the machine, and settled into a good spot to look up and be retrospective. It wasn't all that interesting of a scene. A few satellites passing here and there, some relatively boring activity affecting the magnetic field, etc. And then I started noticing a clicking noise. At first, I thought it was the sound of the snow machine cooling down, as engine expands and contracts a lot in the cold, but the source of the sound definitely wasn't coming from that direction. My next thought was that there must be an animal nearby, which, in case I need to get out of there, you really don't want to mess with a wild animal. But the clicking is far too regular for an animal to produce it. It was fairly mechanical sounding. And again, the source of the sound isn't coming from anywhere around me, it was coming from up. So I naturally looked up to determine the origin of this strange noise. I see what I always see: stars, northern lights, a lazy satellite crossing the sky, all normal stuff. But before I dismiss it all together and begin heading home, I noticed something strange in the aurora borealis. There were rather three strong points of light. I ignored them at first, thinking they were oddly symmetrical stars, but this proved false. They were definitely getting brighter. I kept staring in morbid fascination as they grew stronger and stronger, yet still only remaining single points in the sky. All the clicking noise is getting louder and louder and more pronounced, almost like someone started tapping a pen on the desk and clicking billiard balls together inside my head. Then it stops. The lights are gone. The clicking is not heard. And aside from being a little stiff, cold, and rather petrified, I'm fine. So I jump back on the snowmobile thinking I'm going crazy. The machine takes a little longer than usual to start up and I'm beginning to worry, but soon it's running and I'm heading back into town. As I'm driving back, several plausible scenarios as to what have occurred are running through my head. I'm thinking it could have been a helicopter from the mine or some strange Northern Lights behavior, etc. Probably not a big deal. I pull up to my house. Lights are all dark. Strange. It wasn't that late when I left. Open outer door as quietly as possible, remove winter gear, and enter the inner door. House is quiet. Really quiet. My parents are teachers and usually up late in the morning, marking or watching TV. All I'm thinking is I have to get to bed without anybody noticing. Proves to be as easy because I'm under the covers very quickly. I go to set my alarm for the next day. All of a sudden, everything makes sense. Engine hard, stiff, rather chilly. Nobody up when I was gone. Felt relatively short period of time. It was almost 11 when I left, and now it was creeping up on 6 a.m. I stood staring at the clicking lights for almost 7 hours. I never ended up sleeping that night, and I didn't go late in the snowmobile machine rides anymore. Story 9. A few years ago, me and my best friend moved into a rent house. It was definitely a weird house, and I got some weird vibes out of it. Every night when I went to sleep, I would hear music. Not singing, just music. Like someone had a distant radio on, and not any song I could ever name. I had dreams every night of a crowd of faceless people with a little boy standing in front. He never spoke, but I could tell he was trying to tell me something. The fridge would often open on its own, and cats would hiss at corners and such. We would smell cigarettes coming from the back room at 3 o'clock every day. My aunts were, and still are, big in the ghost hunting, so they set up cameras in my house one night. We didn't catch much, but one of the cameras was spun in circles about 15 seconds at 3 in the morning. The porch light turned on by itself and got really bright, then faded off. When I moved out of the house after 2 years, I had trouble sleeping because I didn't have the music anymore. It was a very strange, strange house. Story 10. I'll be the first to say that all of this stuff could have taken place in my head. The mind is a very freaky thing and can play some pretty trippy tricks on you. Sorry for the length. When I was scared as a kid, my dad would always tell me that in life you should not be scared of ghosts. Fear the living because they can actually hurt you. In my teenage years, I had come into some money after my father committed suicide and I received an inheritance from him. At the time of my dad's passing, he and my mom owned a cabin up in Oregon by Mount Bachelor. The cabin had been put up for sale since my mom could no longer afford the payments, and renting it out was not covering the payments either. The cabin was set to go on the market for sale in less than a month and was in the process of finalizing all the paperwork with the realtor and lawyer. So, for a month's time, the cabin was not going to be rented out any longer and was going to be vacant. I saw this as a chance to get away for a while and clear my head in light of all things going on. I quit work, packed up my snowboarding gear, grabbed my dog, and headed up in my dad's car that he'd willed to me to the cabin. Now, this was our family cabin that my parents rented out throughout the year when we weren't using it. I had keys to the cabin and also had the code for the alarms, so I did not feel the need to stop at the rental management company and advise them of my stay. That has nothing to do with the coming story, but I felt the need to mention it anyway. My first 2 days at the cabin were normal and nothing out of the unusual happened. Spent my days playing with my dog in the snow, snowboarding, in the evenings, PlayStation or listening to music, drinking and smoking out on the balcony. Had already stocked up on food, cigarettes, and liquor, so I was pretty shut in aside from the occasional out to hit the slopes. With my dog as company and DVD/PlayStation as entertainment, I was quite content and started to feel relaxed after all the drama that preceded my outing. The cabin itself was 2 stories. Bottom story had a living room and a side guest bedroom along with a small kitchen. Upstairs had another 2 rooms along with a walkout balcony attached to the master bedroom. Most of my time there was spent either in the living room, kitchen, or master bedroom. I never ventured into the other rooms and always kept the doors leading to them shut. Open doors to darker rooms always creeped me out. Anyhow, the third day had came around and I was going through my usual routine of playing with my dog. His name was Midnight, by the way, and he has since also passed. Playing games and watching TV. That day it was pretty heavy snow, so I did not feel like trekking down the hill to the main road in my car and decided to stay in. That's when things started to get a bit weird. In our area, there were only 2 cabins adjacent to ours, maybe a block from each other. All of the other cabins around here were a mile away from ours. Surrounding us was mostly forest and very tall pine trees. Tall. This is important later on. Both these cabins were empty. From the past couple days, I knew no one was staying down there. Grave enough background, and I'm gonna jump into the weirdness. Around midday, while outside with my dog, I noticed what looked like footprints in the snow around the area surrounding our cabin. It was still snowing, so the footprints looked semi fresh, like someone had been there in the last 20-30 minutes before me. I thought that maybe someone staying in the cabin near me that I had not noticed. Maybe they were shut ins like me, alright, whatever. The prints led away from my cabin and they disappeared in the snow towards the denser part of the trees, disregarded the footprints, and went back inside. Nighttime came around and I decided to head to bed. My dog Midnight was laying on the bed with me when I noticed his ears perk up to a listening/standstill position. This was followed by him quickly jumping off the bed and running downstairs to the living room. I lay in bed and stayed silent and I was kind of freaked out and could hear him moving downstairs back and forth. After around 5 minutes, he ran back upstairs and started to do his little doggy dance for the sign that he had to go to the restroom or that he wanted to go outside. Well, fine. I can't say no to him, so we both went downstairs to the outside driveway for him to do his thing. Only he didn't use the restroom. As soon as we were outside, he started to pull his leash, trying to drag me to where he wanted to go. He kept looking into the dense part of the trees where the prince had been earlier, but he also kept sniffing on the side of the house, looking up towards the roof. After he figured that I did not want to go anywhere he wanted, he sat himself down and stared into the darkness. A bit unusual for him, but alright, maybe there was just forest animals out there that he wants to chase down. But this did nothing. I did not want to chance this, so I pulled him back inside and we headed back upstairs. Around half an hour later, I was lying in bed when I heard what sounded like hooves walking on my roof. It was only a series of about 6 steps, and I rationalized that it could be a pine cone falling from the tree onto the roof, or maybe a kind hearted forest animal running around. But here's the thing, the steps seemed to be spaced apart like a man's lynch stride, so it was really freaking me out. Midnight also heard the noise and was quick to run to the balcony screen door, expecting me to let him out. Alright, you know what? I'm a tough guy, and at the end of the time, I was considered fairly well built and strong enough to handle myself, so I grabbed my coat and shoes along with my cigarettes and flashlight and went out onto the balcony. F it, right? As soon as I went outside, I lit up my cigarette and started canvassing the roof with my light. Nothing there, and the snow on the rooftop was undisturbed. Weird. Must it all been in my head? What about Midnight hearing the noise? Maybe he was feeding off my fear or paranoia? I started to calm down and relax again. By the way, I'm shaking right now, and my heart is beating as fast as I am typing this. My eyes started to adjust to the darkness, and I kept smoking and just staring at the stars and trees next to our cabin. That's when I saw it. In a tree that was a little taller than our cabin, around 20 feet from the balcony, I saw what looked like a man crouched in a squatting position between two branches. It was squatted above one branch, and its arms were extended above its head, holding on to the branch above it. F me, what is that? I wasn't sure if I was really seeing this thing and just stood staring and sat there motionless. I noticed Midnight stand up and start pacing behind me, lightly barking at the same time. The thing still did not move. I put my cigarette out and was debating on shining the light in the thing's direction, but something in my head kept screaming not to. So I walked backwards to the inside of the room and pulled Midnight with me. Once inside, I locked the door and shined the light in the thing's direction, but there was nothing there. I shut the curtains to the screen door and retreated back to the bed, but later on in the night I heard light tapping on the screen door, like someone was tapping on the glass with their fingers. It was consistent and did not stop for nearly an hour. Midnight seems to stare at the door, but he wouldn't go near it anymore. The weirdest part is that I had a feeling like someone was inviting me to open the door, but at the same time I kept hearing my dad's voice in my head telling me to stay in bed and not do it. I listened to my dad's voice and just stayed where I was, passed out eventually, and woke up in the morning and everything was normal. The rest of the week I spent there was non eventful and nothing else outside of the ordinary happened. I totally admit that it could have all been in my head. A lot of stuff was going on at the time, and I was pretty effed up from all the drama. All right, guys, and that was 10 spooky, scary Reddit stories. I hope y'all enjoyed it, and please like and subscribe as I'm trying to get this channel going. And let me know if there's anything y'all want me to cover, and I hope to see y'all back. Have a good one.